Welcome to Total Money Management. We're back. This week we're covering the week of the end of October, 28th to the 1st of November. I'm back with Steve Moriarty, Tom Hill. How are we?
Good,
Fantastic, mate.
Recovered from Halloween, gents.
Oh.
Just.
We didn't have a single door knocker. Maybe because all the lights were off.
Unapproachable.
Yeah. Big sign on the yard saying get stuffed.
Dinks.
Yeah.
Double income, no kids.
Yeah.
Don't turn up here.
Please don't knock. Dogs will go nuts. No, so yeah, did actually. It was all right. Thank you.
Right. We're not relying on Jacob to have any children to save the population, which I think we're talking about at the end of the week. I think I did. Yes, demographics.
Definitely not before
And
I travel
listen,
Europe.
Tom and I, we've kicked in. We've done our part. You really need to step up, mate.
I promise you that I'll have at least 5 when I can afford
Good
them.
man, good man.
All right. Well, this week we're going to cover protecting some profits, mortgage murmurs, talk about housing a little bit. China is ill. We might cover that. Still turning Japanese. Thanks, Dan, for naming the last podcast. It's hilarious. We're paying in dirt and talk a little bit more about bombs. But just to kick us off, once this podcast is released, the election in the US will be done and dusted. So we'll know whether it's Trump or Kamala Harris. So we're going to just cover that a little bit, take a few bets. If you have any questions about it, then we can talk about what that means when they're actually in government. And so, yeah, it might come across as a little bit off once this is released.
Yeah. This could be like the dullest 5 minutes you're ever going to hear on the US election, because it will have already either exploded into, rampant civil war, or it will have been a big, what do they call it? Where nothing happens or something. But look,
Moot point.
Yeah, I just think it is a very, very serious election, right? And the reason why is because Donald Trump's policies, in terms of he's talking about not having income tax. He's talking about making everything 100% tariffs. He's talking about getting Elon Musk to, stop government waste. I could just tell you it would be, quite frankly, chaotic. But a lot of people seem to think that a lot of economists have come out and said, Trump would be way worse. But that is because a lot of economists are mad free trade people. So you got to weigh that up. I think it's really, Kamala Harris is just continuity. They will really, I think there'll be some big things happen in the war front. I think they'll try and get some settlements on these, Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Iran, and China and Taiwan is not really a war, but it's an underlying tension there all the time. So I think the US would probably get together with China and say, righto, we need to sort these places out and come to some sort of agreement. That would be the biggest thing, I think, with Harris. Because the economy is just going to roll along like it did with Biden, right? They're going to keep spending the money and blah, blah, blah. The issue with Trump is Europe would completely freak out because of Trump doesn't like NATO. The Ukrainians would completely freak out because they know that Trump would probably abandon them in their fight against Russia. And I think Israel would be fairly safe in terms of its clash with Iran. But look, it's so hard to predict. Who knows, right? But I just think if Trump gets in, we're in for a while, 2025.
I mean, if we know anything about politicians, is that they're consistent in their inconsistency. And so everything that Trump's saying and Kamala's saying, to be quite frank, will it actually eventuate?
Yeah, because a lot of the time they don't have as much control as you think they do. A lot of people think the US president has a lot of control, but he doesn't, or she doesn't, because that's the way they set it up. They were distrustful of federal government. And that's why they set it up, so they didn't give the president, total power. It's not a bad way to be. You can't, it avoids, and that goes for Donald Trump as well. He can do some stuff, but there are constraints that he has that he can't do anything about, and we noticed that last time.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, I think it'd be interesting time to be alive.
Well, I mean, good news this week. Bitcoin hit 70,000.
Oh yeah, get that in,
We're
boys,
all
eh?
Jumping around with some money.
Watch it go to 100,000 if Donald Trump's elected.
Oh, I would love that. No, it was a good week. We rebalanced, made some cash. It was nice. Paid for my holiday.
Did one of you guys steal my water?
No, there's one here. I might have stole this one. We lost Tom's coffee last time. We've lost
Tom's
your
coffee,
water this
Steve's
time.
water's gone.
There's someone.
Is yours down the bottom?
this one.
There you go.
Drinks are not safe.
Mate, you're wasting valuable talk time.
Oh, it says you.
We've only got 30 minutes. Get on.
All right.
Keep to time.
On that note, Monday. So around 75% of retirees with a mortgage owe more than they have in super. And around 50% of 55 to 65-year-olds expect to sell their property or use their super to repay the mortgage. And we've got a link to an article here, title being Bank of Mum and Dad becoming a really critical factor affecting how many Australians will retire.
Yeah. I think that's a major concern. And I know personally of people my age, I'm 61, 62 soon, and older who have still got debt. And part of it is they've tapped their equity to get the kids into the property market, right? Or they're just older and I've got a few friends who are older and they've invested in property, right? They've got mortgages, right? Investment mortgages.
As in they've invested late in life.
Yeah, like they've got to my age and gone, oh, our property's worth $1 million. Oh, well, let's borrow 300,000. Let's use 300,000 of the equity to buy a property because we've paid ours off. We've now got an extra $400 a week. Okay, well, let's buy another property. And in some ways, it's a bit like no cost, right? So it's
Oh, I met two people this week in their 20s
tricky.
where mum and dad, actually one of them, grandma and granddad, was the guarantor for the property.
right. Okay.
And so it's happening throughout the whole family. Everyone just,
Yep.
no one can, the kids can't afford something, so mum and dad, nan and granddad are
Everyone's
like,
pitching in. Yeah. Which I've got to say, I think is seriously an issue.
It's scary.
Well, you've got so many people in it. There's just, this is why I say it's a real problem because you've got 2.3 million landlords. Yeah, some of them have got, money and dono money and stuff like that. I get all that. But boy, oh boy, there's a lot of people involved in property. Builders, real estate agents, architects, renovations, furniture people. There's so many people hanging off the property industry. It's unbelievable. And that's why I think if it goes south, boy, oh boy, stand aside.
Yeah, you don't want to get stuck in that.
No.
But looking overseas, it's not looking too rosy in China again. So their industrial profits are plunging as economic momentum falters. And what's that talking to?
Well, if you look at Wednesday as well, what I'm trying to point out there is that China's businesses are struggling because of overcapacity and because that's where the government's focused on, getting instead. The China's problem is they haven't got enough. They're not giving the workers enough money to raise their overall standard of living, right? And again, this is the model. What they do is they say, oh, we need to restart the economy. Okay, well, let's give manufacturers more money to export more. But the problem with that is, as we've seen, is Europe is now saying, we don't want your EVs. We're going to put a 50% tariff on it, right? So the Americans won't allow it, right? So Brazil has said to China, we don't want your steel. We want our own steel. So you're getting this greater protectionism. When you do that, the Chinese can't just keep giving money to manufacturers to make 25 million cars a year when the market's 15, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So they can't rely on exports forever. Now, on top of that, you look at the property bubble on Wednesday, the Chinese real estate bubble's declining, right? And so you've got this double whammy where, again, things are just falling down completely. The only way you can really save that is by saying, right, let's give people a heap of money where they can go and buy stuff again, right? But the Chinese government don't want to do that because, as I've said before, Xi says, no, they'll all get fat and lazy like Westerners. No, don't do that. But this is where the internal constraints come in, where, you can, and we've seen this game before, right? Japan used this model. That's why it's gone nowhere for 30 years, right? Brazil used the model. Russia used the model. And other countries have done that. And that's why I can say to you, I generally, and I'm not being arrogant, but I generally know what the outcome is because I know the constraints. So it's not like you can just wave a wand and go, oh, we've got, millions of people in property debt. Oh, well, we'll just wipe it away, right? Because
Doesn't work like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because the banks then go, hang on, dude.
What about me?
What about us? Well, you just can't, you can't wipe it away. So that's why the Japanese government stepped in and has huge budget deficits because what it's doing is substituting for a collapse, right? So in the GFC, the Americans said, oh, well, that's the way it happened. So everything went chaotic for 12 to 18 months, but then they got up again. In Japan, what they did was said, no, don't do that because it'll be an absolute cluster. You know what? We'll just keep the place afloat and pay it down over 40. So it's like having a mortgage and saying, all right, I throw it up and I lose 100 grand and I go and rent. Or what you do is you make the payment every week, but you've got no spare money.
You just make the interest payments for
Yeah. So there's no
years.
growth, right? And that's what Japan chose. But they are the only two outcomes that you can choose because you've got so much debt. You can't just wave it away. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to say to people is China is going to spend a long time deciding whether they actually do it US style or do it Japanese style.
Yep.
That's why I say they're turning Japanese because the
slow bleed or
the slow
put
bleed,
them out of their misery.
And I think that's what China will do because that will probably result in less social uproar.
Well, if you look at the chart, 2016 through to 2024, we're almost 10 years into it.
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So it's not as if we're already there.
Yeah. It's not as if you're going, oh, look, it's coming.
Yeah. Thursday.
Yep. Just talking about childcare workers.
They're all getting paid more, right?
Yeah,
That's
which
what
is
it
great.
Yeah.
About 12,000 early childhood educators are set to lock in a 10% pay rise before Christmas.
Awesome.
With the finalisation of the first multi-employer bargaining application under the new government regime.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I mean, for anyone who sends their kids to these places, everyone's forking out a ton. And these guys have a tough job.
Yeah. But then, the thing here too, Tom, is the money's being made by the owners.
Yes.
Right, not the workers.
100%.
And this is the major problem, right? When those people work there, don't have enough money, well, the economy's not going anywhere, right? But on the flip side too, as we were laughing about earlier, who wants to have children if your rent is through the roof, you can't afford a mortgage, and besides that, if you send your kids to childcare, it's $700 a week. Like you just look at it, and 2 kids. You'd look at it and go, why would I have kids? Bugger that. We'll just go to Europe every year and have fun. And I'm serious, because it's a really big problem, right? Because governments are standing around going, oh my God, how, what's wrong with these young people? Why won't they have children? It's like, mate, have a look at what they're getting into. I mean, it's just bloody awful. Why, as I say, you sit down with your wife or your partner and go, oh, let's work out what it would cost. You'd go, no, sorry.
Well, that's the funny thing. I don't think many people sit down and go, let's work out how much it'd be to have a child.
No. They usually go, oh, we're having a kid.
We're having a kid now.
Oops.
But, the bigger picture here is this is happening in early childhood educators, but what we're expecting to see is more of this over the next decade or so, where people are getting paid more because they're going to need to buy homes and to actually raise families in the first place anyway. Yeah. So nurses will be paid more, policemen, doctors, all those people.
If you have a look at the infrastructure, and it's probably a bit boring, but what I'm trying to say to people is infrastructure everywhere is breaking, right? Sydney Water want to raise prices 50%. 100%. Because the infrastructure is breaking down, right? British infrastructure is really terrible. Australia's infrastructure is really terrible. America's a disaster zone. Now, the reason why is because in the 80s, when we privatised stuff, we said, well, we'll give Sydney Water to a private company. Well, they've gone, yeah, bugger the infrastructure. We're going to pay the CEO millions. And what's happened now is it's all got to a point where it's so run down that it's not working anymore, right? And so, you have to get to the point where you say, listen, someone's going to have to stump up a few billion for this water system. And Sydney Water go, we haven't got the money, right? Whereas in the old days, the government used to budget for that and budget for the upkeep of it, right? And that's why you're seeing infrastructure around the world breaking down, because if we all build bridges in 1930 and it's 2024, well, they're all generally going to start deteriorating at the same rate, right? And that's what's going on. So you're going to see a lot more government intervention because it's going to be necessary, right? And it leads on to Friday, what we were talking about last week with the bombs, like Australia's going to spend $21 billion to produce long-range missiles. Well, it's no good if we haven't got decent infrastructure, right? Oh, we've got these crumbling roads and we've got a shitty electrical system and, we've got we've got signals that don't work properly. It's like, hang on, what's the problem? It's like, well, you guys won't buy, you won't upkeep the telecommunications, you won't upkeep the roads, you won't upkeep the power system. That's the way it works.
But we have missiles.
But we have missiles, and the problem is they won't go anywhere because we won't be able to get them to the sites or do what they need to do. And this is what the Americans have found out. The Americans have discovered that they really need to revamp their whole military-industrial complex because they've let it run down for 30 years because there wasn't a threat from China or Russia or, there's a couple of outbreaks here and there, but there was no really big systemic stuff. Now there's big systemic stuff, right, with Israel and Iran. And so there's going to be a lot of government spending into these places. And this is where the opportunity for investors is, right, where you can start looking at things and saying, okay, government are supporting long-range missiles. Okay, so who builds missiles? Oh, well, you're going to need critical minerals. Oh, okay, well, I need to have a look at that. They're going to need, steel. Oh, right, okay. They're going to need, special telecommunications, cybersecurity. All of this sort of stuff is going to really start ramping up because we're spending a lot of money, 21 billion on missiles. So that will have a multiplier effect of, if it's 2 to 1, well, there's 40 billion.
Yeah.
Right, so there's going to be all this sort of stuff that this is what governments have to organise for, right? Because the market doesn't do that. And the government sits down and says, listen, we want to protect our northern border. Okay, we need 21 billion's worth of missiles. Okay, and we need to spend 300 billion on subs. Oh, all right. And we need to spend 25 billion on planes, right? Okay, all right. So how do we do that? Oh, okay, well, first we've got to house them. Oh, okay, so we need to build some, sheds and stuff. Yep, and we need to train people. Oh, right, okay, we need that. So what I'm saying is when you do that, you look at it and go, hang on, this is worth, this is $300 to $400 billion we're going to spend.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of money, right? And so that's where you get...
How are we going to raise that money? I'll just put petrol prices up to like $4.
Well, no, the government,
Just
and
print it.
again, this is where the government will start to control where capital goes, right? So instead of saying to people or the banks, stop lending to people who want to speculate in the property market, we want you to buy the bonds because we want to be able to pay for these missiles, right? And that's what I mean. This is where things get really different because there's now a different agenda. It's not all free markets and stuff, right? And it's going to be very tricky negotiating all of that. But what I'm sort of saying is to a lot of young fellas like yourselves, it'll come as a real surprise, right? Because you haven't lived through this stuff before.
Yeah, I was interesting, slightly off tangent, but I was at a conference last week and Steve Baxter, the guy off Shark Tank, was a keynote speaker, and he's just invested in 2 or 3 defence businesses, one in Australia. And someone stood up and said, why defence? And he was like, that's the only thing I'm looking at for the next 10 years. That's going to return almost a guaranteed investment.
Yeah.
And obviously not financial advice on here, but it was interesting for someone that's a venture capitalist with a few $100 million. This is where I'm looking to invest in my businesses now. So
Bingo.
yeah. Anyway, bonus section. We've got all sorts on
Oligopolies.
the oligopolies.
That's like the total sugar chart.
When you look at this and you see
It's just
that
sugar.
a handful of companies control all these brands,
Yeah.
mind-bending.
Yep. And you wonder, and people out there going, oh, the problem is wage inflation. Oh, really? The problem's not wage inflation. The problem is these companies have got complete and total control of the market. And again, this is what's been happening over the last 30 years, right? And it's been encouraged, whereas now they're starting to say, particularly in the United States, with a woman called Lina Khan who's going after all these monopolies, because what it does is it stops innovation, right? And so they need to get innovative again. So they can't do it if Facebook or Nestle, PepsiCo, Coke go, yeah, no, we're not doing it. No, that bullshit. We're going to keep the same old stuff. So they need to break those up. That's why they're going after Google.
Do you think it's possible, though? I mean,
Yep,
yeah.
mate. Look, if the US government, they don't get it right all the time, right? And it's stupid if anyone thinks that. But when these big structural changes happen, part of it, Jacob, is you can't sit there in a silo and pretend to be different. And what I mean by that is there's a really fundamental point in investing, which is you can buy or you can sell, but you can't control the outcome, right? You can't tell everybody to, stump up and buy my place for $2 million because I bloody well need the money. You can't do that, right? So what I'm saying is once the forces are in place, which is at the moment is deglobalization, increased military spending, these things change the whole global dynamic. And that's why I say if Kamala Harris gets in, it'll be continuity. If Trump gets in, it's going to just speed the current process, which will be more deglobalization, right? Less immigration, more regional wars, right? Because these things are already in place. And so when it gets a roll on, it's really hard to stop that. And that's why all the tech bros are in the US saying, and Elon Musk said, the first person I'm going to sack is Lina Khan, right? Because she's breaking up all these monopolies, right? Well, the tech bros don't want that because they've got the monopolies, right? So that's what they're battling against. And it's a tough gig. It's not like tech bros just roll over and go, yeah, whatever. That's why they all lobby and pay politicians millions.
Get them on side.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Well, short story. What we got here? Remote.
I just want to point out here in that first article, right? Reeves has made her choice, but success is not guaranteed. The main point is I want to look at the last sentence there, which is last two. It marks the burial of Thatcherism. It also heralds a permanently bigger state. And that's what that's what we've been talking about for a little while. Get used to big government, right? Because it's coming back in your life, whether you like it or not. That's what Martin Wolf is also saying.
Yeah,
The idea,
we've never seen it.
No.
Really.
That's what I mean. Anybody, look, guys, I'm telling you, anybody under 45 has never seen it, even 50, right? Because we've had less government in Australia from 1982 when Hawke was elected. Well, that's 42 years ago. I'm 62 in February. Even me, it didn't kick off until I was 20. You don't really start thinking about economics till you're probably 25, 30, right?
If you're into it. Otherwise, you never look at it
Exactly. And that's what I mean. You look at it and say anybody under 55 is basically going, what the hell's going on? It's like, mate, this is the way it was when I was a kid, right? Mortgage rates were 13.5% frozen. There was no negotiation of, 11 or 14. It was 13.5, right? Hours were 9 to 5. Right, banks closed at 3. Like there was all these really, really hard regulations. But, we didn't look at it at that time and go, oh, this is outrageous. Banks should be open till 5 or, on an ATM.
It's just how it was.
It's just how it was. You just sort of went, yeah, righto, okay. I can't remember the last time I touched cash.
Oh, neither.
Right? I just...
Yeah, usually the casino.
Yeah.
When we're losing. All right, and the rest of it is just covering birth rates are falling, UK births have fallen to the same level of deaths, which is terrifying. And And it all just ties into the fact that people can't afford to.
Germany has more
things.
dogs than they have children under 10 years of age. Go figure.
surprise.
They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're not having children.
Oh, dear. All right. Well, I've got a couple of questions to run through just on the socials.
Righto, what do we got?
What I've got here is the landlords don't set the markets. What is it here? I've lost it. Apparently, landlords don't set the markets. The market sets the markets.
Well, generally, yeah.
The price. Sorry, not the market.
The price.
Yeah, landlords don't set the price. Everyone else sets the price.
Yeah, generally, that is a bit of a supply and demand issue. But there's other things that influence that, like the amount of Airbnbs and,
Yep.
you know, how many. Everybody needed more rooms because they're working from home. You know, all that sort of stuff. We got, 8 zillion immigrants, working in shops and they need homes, all that sort of stuff. So I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah. All right. And that's an easy one. Another one. How do you guys manage risk?
Carefully.
We've got about 19 different workshops on managing risk.
No,
Asset
look,
allocation.
Can I give you and I should have put up a chart for this.
Yeah.
We think about risk in 4 ways. The first is personal. How much money you got? How old are you? The second is personality. The second part of that is your personality. Are you a dude that loves going to the casino and doing big bets or taking big chances, or are you someone who's more conservative? Right. So that's the first part. That's an internal thing. The second internal thing is market knowledge. How much do you know? Right. If you go and buy silver at the top, dude, best of luck. You don't know what you're doing, right? So you need market knowledge. So those 2 things are things you can do something about. I'm going to go and get smart and, do a course or learn about finance, right? I'm going to learn about myself and figure out that I'm a crazy dude, so I really need a systematic approach to investing. Now, they're the internal stuff. The external stuff is market valuation. You can be the smartest guy in the room, but if you buy at the market cycles when it's at the peak, best of luck, right? So you need to know about valuation, and we talked about that last week, right? And the fourth part is what we've developed is the risk hierarchy, right? Which is saying if I buy an index, I'm probably going to have a lot less risk than I am by buying an individual company, and there's a huge difference between those. So that's how you think about risk. You put them together and say, okay, do I know myself? Yep. Okay. Have I got a good handle on what I'm doing here? Yep. Righto. Okay. How's the valuation? Oh, it looks reasonable. Okay. That's pretty good. All right. Am I going to buy a bunch of stocks, or am I going to just say, oh, well, I'll just buy the energy ETF, right? Instead of trying to pick BP or Shell or whatever company you want, right?
Good.
But the key is focus on not losing money. Never, always look at an investment and go, how can I lose money? Oh, I can lose money by, I don't know what I'm like as an investor. Well, that's not a good point. I can lose money by going, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I've got no market knowledge. Oh, okay. I can lose money by going, oh, what's this thing, valuation? I don't know what you're talking about, right? And the fourth one is going, yeah, I'm going to buy junior specky miners. Okay. All right, well, there you go. But let me tell you, when you put all those together, you're really asking for it.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how we sort of think about it.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. I'll get the chart of the week, which we just skipped over. And it's all blurry. I'm not sure. I haven't got my glasses on. S&P 500 statistically expensive on 19 and 20.
Yeah.
So that's what we talked about last week.
So there's 1 out of 20 metrics that it's undervalued.
I'm going to pick the one.
It's awful. And we got one more chart, haven't we? We've got the talking
educational
point.
piece at the end, the earning yield cycle.
Yep.
If you want to cover that.
What I just want to show people here is, and again, talk to our point about not losing money. Let's say Tom and I, sorry, this might take a minute, but it's really important. Tom and I both start with 100 grand, right? Mm-hmm. Now we put 80 grand in stocks and we put 20 in cash, righto? We go back and we come back 5 years later, right? Now, my stocks are worth, the whole thing is worth 240. Okay, so we still got 20 in cash. So that means our stocks are worth 220. So they're gone from 80,000 to 220, right? Mm-hmm. Now, Tom says, Steve, the market's crazy. It's really, really overvalued. I'm going to swing from 2080 right? 20 in cash to 80 in cash, 80%.
Yep.
Right? So Tom sells 100 and I think it's 90,000 bucks worth of stocks.
Yep.
170, right? So now Tom's only got 50,000 in the stocks. And I've said, Tom, you're an idiot, buy and hold works. Okay. Now, we have a really big drawdown, right? 50% from a cape of, say,
37.
well, 37. Let's
Roughly
pick an arbitrary
37.1.
number, right? Either way, you get a 50% drawdown.
Yeah.
So down the bottom, we get down here and we say, okay, Tom's got 190 in cash and he's got 25 in stocks, right? So his 50 in stocks went to 25. He lost 50%.
Yep.
So all up at the bottom, Tom's got $215,000. And then he launches up again because he knows the cape's now back at 10 or something. And so he launches and puts in more money.
So it goes back into 80% stock and 20%.
If he wants, yeah, or 70-30 or whatever, right? Now, me, I go down the bottom. I've still got my 20 grand in cash, but my stocks at 220 are now worth 110. So I've now got 130,000 down the bottom. Tom's got 215,000 down the bottom. Who's better off?
Yeah. And the price per share is significantly lower. And
Yep.
you've got way more shares
Yeah.
the second time round.
So what I'm saying is, if you look at the earnings yield, what you see is when the earnings yield is really high, the stock market's really low, right? And that's what you want. But people get guided by the stock market movement and ignore the yield. Like we talked about last week. Listen, you can get, the market's yielding 2%. Yeah, mate, but the prices, it's going gangbusters. This is why Warren Buffett always talks about it, right? Because what he's trying to say to people is, yeah, but that's probably going to disappear, right? What you want to do is say, Steve, I want to invest my money and I can earn 10% for the next 20 years, which is what Tom will do because he's got a bucket load of money he can put in down the bottom. But to do that, Tom had to sell when he was at the top.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I'm trying to say to people who buy and hold, look at the reality. You get a miserable return because the price rises don't sustain over the same period that you're an investor. Right? And that's why I say in 2000, you'd have been going, oh man, the stock market is unbelievable. Right? Because from 1982, it had gone up compound about 16% per year. But then in 2003, you'd lost half of it.
Yep.
Then it went up again, doubled in 4 years. Then it went down 50% again. Right? Now, in 2000, the cape was at 44, and in 2007, it was at 27, and now it's at 37. So, as they say, just saying.
I think absolutely. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, it's probably worth jumping on the YouTube, watching this bit back with a chart, because just trying to hear it and make sense of it, it's probably going to get confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need the chart there. So jump on and have a look, folks.
Perfect.
Great. Such a golden nugget. All right, well, let's wrap it up there. We'll see you guys next week. And, enjoy your week, fellas.
Adios,
Perfect.
amigos.
Cheers.
As always, remember, we don't provide financial advice.